Good morning, Dave. How you doing?
Hi, Ryan. Good. How about yourself?
Doing good. So we got introduced by a mutual connection, and I started looking at your stuff. And I think you were looking at some of the stuff that we're doing, and we were just joking around as we were just about to go live. That I think we're going to have a fun interview here because I think we see the world the same way as far as what growing and selling companies all about. And it sounds like you've got some bruises and stories to share to us. But for the listeners that are not familiar with your background, just give us a rundown of like how did you get into the industry? What how did you get to where you are today?
Well, my first sales job was with IBM, and I kind of got the high tech sales bug, and went to another company and did well, and really decided that selling for technology companies was going to be my career. Unfortunately, in technology, as you know, that it's very unstable because technologies come and go. And so, after my fifth either company buyout or bankruptcy, I decided to try and find something that I thought would be a little more stable. So I hired on with a small M&A firm in my hometown and trained with him, and decided I wanted to represent tech companies and he wanted to represent more what he would call brick and mortar or
Mhm.
mainstream type businesses. So I spun off, and that was the start of MidMarket Capital.
And what year was that?
That was, gosh, about 18 years ago.
Oh my gosh! So, I mean, just maybe for some benchmarks for us, how many companies have you bought and sold over the course of almost 2 decades?
We average about one and a half a year. We're a
Okay.
small firm, and they take 6 to 9 months to go through the whole process. So it's a labor intensive, time consuming process.
Well, and I think what we're going to dive into today is you can't. A lot of people call and say, "Hey, I want to sell my business like tomorrow," right? Which is not really how it works. And I think that you're one and a half. I mean, there's so many people that have these big, huge shops. I don't think these owners understand, or some people understand that it doesn't mean you're going to. If they do a high volume, that doesn't mean that you're getting the good expertise. Anyways, I mean, there's a lot of people that get thrown in front of analysts that don't actually know what they're doing too. And so there's a lot of questions that they need to ask in order to hire the right investment banker.
Right.
So, what kind of tech companies are you representing and what, because I know for the kind of the agenda of the conversation is you've got a lot, where we can dive into the recurring revenue and you've got a lot of expertise on like what people are valuing and why. And what is your definition of technology and what have you been seeing over the last few years?
Well, we mostly, because of my background, we mostly represent information technology companies and software companies, or healthcare information technology companies, generally companies with a high level of intellectual property as a component to their business value. So it's not unusual for us to hear from our clients, well, we want more than a multiple of cash flow. We want strategic value.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen just an incredible move toward the recurring revenue or subscription model. The very high profile ones are like Salesforce.com, which really kicked off the subscription model. They never had a license model; it was always subscription. Microsoft, since Satya Nadella came on board, has converted to that model, and they went through the growing pains of that, but now they are hitting on all cylinders. Adobe, I mean, you name it, every major software company is converted to that. And
Mm-hmm.
then in the information technology world, it used to be, 10, 15 years ago, they had these folks that were project-based consultants and what they called VARs, or value-added resellers. So what they would do is they would represent, Microsoft and Hewlett-Packard and IBM, and they would be hired by a company and put together the solution for them. They'd sell the hardware, take a markup on that, sell the software, take a markup on that, and do project-based consulting. Almost all of those firms are converting to what they now call a managed services provider, which basically says, hey, we'll be your outsourced data processing department. We'll do hardware as a service. We'll We'll do help desk. We'll do, major projects, but what they are looking for is this monthly recurring revenue. And that, along with EBITDA or cash flow, are really the two major driving valuation metrics that we see today.
So you're ringing on my old world here. So it's gonna be fun because we had with the copier business we had built out the managed IT services, and that like there's so many. So there's a couple of ways that I want to unpack this, Dave, is because one is that you've got some good information, and you've got a book that I want you to kind of mention as well. But like, why? I mean, why is the recurring revenue so important from the owner's perspective, but also the buyer's perspective? But then also, maybe the second part of that was what we can dive into is how to start doing that, because I think there's a lot of businesses that are just really challenged with how do I actually go about doing that. So maybe let's start from the sellers and the buyers perspective. Why is recurring revenue so important, and how are all those different categories of revenue that you just mentioned, how are they valued differently in the eyes of a buyer?
Right. That Ryan, that's a great point. The reoccurring revenue model is, in terms of a business buyer, it's all about risk reduction. So the number one fear is I buy your company, and the day I take over, your customers start walking out the door. So with contracts in place, and the greater the percentage of your revenue that's on a contractual basis, the not only the higher the value you're going to get for your company, but also your cash at closing will be higher. So a lot of people don't realize that very few in the companies in the lower end of the market, small, medium businesses, get bought completely 100% cash at close or completely 100% stock. There usually is either an earnout or a seller note or some other contingent factor based on, reducing the buyer's risk and reducing their amount of cash that they have to put down at closing. So, for a seller, the greater your percentage of recurring, contractually recurring revenue, that reduces the risk to the buyer. And therefore, one, you'll get a lot more interest out in the market. So you'll have more competition for your deal, which drives up the price. As I said, you'll get a higher valuation, and you'll get a more favorable terms. So, for example, if you say, I want to stay on with the business for 2 or 3 years, if you have no recurring revenue, they're going to want to lock you up for 4 or 5 and make an earnout 4 or 5 years or 6 years long. So it gives you a lot more freedom. In terms of turning your business into a recurring revenue model, obviously I touched on the software and the IT services, but let's say you're a florist, for example, and you sell flowers. Well, one way to do it would be to go contact the small companies in your area and maybe have a monthly plant exchange service where you come in and manage their plants. I had a doctor friend who did a concierge model. So he cut down the number of patients and was just a very high touch scenario for a fixed annual fee for a patient. Any time and materials kinds of things that you currently do, try and figure out a way to turn those into a monthly or an annual contract, like an HVAC. Have your winter checkup and summer checkup as part of a contract. We even had a company that did pool maintenance, bought a pool maintenance software company, so they would go out and sell the software to other pool maintenance companies. So it's each business is unique, but you really need to try and figure out, if you're contemplating selling your business, or even if you're not, it's a better business model. On January 1st, when you turn on the lights, you want to know where your revenue is coming from.
Yeah, it's just as stressful for you as it would be for a potential buyer.
Yep. We actually had a company that was buying one of our clients that was a managed services provider, and they gave us a formula. They actually spelled it out. They said your hardware and software VAR type sales are worth 10 cents on the dollar. Your break fix is worth 63 cents on the dollar. and your managed services contracts are worth $1.27 on the dollar. So it really defined in my mind exactly how these buyers are looking at it. They, a hardware and software sale or a sales pipeline or projected sales, that is not very solid if you're a buyer. But having contracts that, have 2 years or 3 years remaining, that's really, really important as a risk reduction strategy.
Well, and I literally went through that because that was my old industry, and we had a huge pipeline, a lot of transactions, and then literally it was just what are your contracts? they like almost skip over all of that
Right.
stuff and go what's actually guaranteed,
Right.
and so which I think, and I don't know if you see this, Dave. I believe that a lot of these listeners are going, I totally agree. Like, yeah, there's a lot of there's very few people that would disagree with how important the strategy is, and then it kind of comes down to is okay, what the heck can I do as an owner in whatever industry it is? If I'm not in the tech space, how can I start doing this? And I think it's a big challenge, whether it's and I experienced, and I don't know if you've kind of followed some of your old clients or potential clients where we went, a lot of people I've watched and I've experienced, and I was actually with a client yesterday trying to go to the break fixed, and it is a son of a bitch because you're reliant on the big hits for cash flow. But if you take that big hit, let's say you're making $100,000 per software project or per time and material or per whatever it is that you're doing, and you need that gross profit and that cash flow to all of a sudden throw it onto 36 months and you're making $2,000 a month, it just like blows up your entire financial model. So I'm curious on like what are some creative things that you've seen people doing as they're going through that or they see those challenges?
It really does in the short term, as you correctly state, Ryan, that it kind of blows up your cash flow scenario. It's a tough transition, but at about the end of year 2, it then shifts over. And so you can see by just, Microsoft's performance for about 8 years, it was dead money if you were an investor. And when Satya Nadella came in and converted them to, subscription model, it took a couple years, but now it's all positive because it builds on itself. And it's basically, they used to rely on, I bought my PC and I would get, Windows 7 and I'd use that for 10 years. Right now it's, Microsoft is supplying my email at $5 per person per month. That goes on and on and on and on. And at a certain point, the cash flow turns much more positive than your old, sell one thing at a time model.
Have you seen? Because it's beautiful when it starts to happen. It's just very scary because you have to make sure that you're pricing it right, that you're selling it correctly, and then you got the right contracts and making sure that you've actually written those correctly. Is there anything that you've seen in the life cycle of when someone, like if someone were to back in to go, okay, I'm going to want to sell my business at this date, like where in that life cycle of turning into the recurring revenue would you see them? Because they don't want to do it when it's dead money because there is no EBITDA and they don't have the tax returns to show what's going on. I mean, I'm curious on that life cycle of where they should kind of start calibrating themselves.
Yeah, I think that just kind of a rough guesstimate is somewhere between in terms of a pricing model. If you've got a license, or even people are doing hardware as a service now or infrastructure as a service, where it's like a rolling lease. But what I've seen is kind of the 28 to 38 month sort of full payout for that, if it were a lump sum, turning it into the recurring model. So you basically have your purchase price, let's say it's $1 million, you would consider the payoff over, let's say, 36 months. And that would be your monthly rate for that $1 million lump sum. And then the good part about that is if the technology stays or if that piece of equipment stays, you continue to roll that over and they're continuing to pay you that fee. So that's pure profit after that.
Total side note is I don't know if because you keep mentioning the hardware, and I think we've got a similar exposure to my old industry and the current industry that I'm actually still working with is there's a client of mine called BEI that is trying to really change the copier model where instead of even leasing these, it's called IDaaS, where it's device as a
Okay.
service. So it's literally copiers and printers that are just all rolling in. Well, you won't even be able to own them or lease them anymore. It's just a rental program. So like you're just gonna like it's everything on the entire network is just on a monthly payment.
Right. Are they doing it by like the usage, like per copy, or are they just
Well, they're not. They're trying to eliminate the cost per
okay?
copy because essentially they've got all the data to say, okay, here's how much it runs, here's the uptime, here's the parts and the usage and the labor. Here's you should this piece of equipment should be $200 a month and it's all included of everything, all the service, everything.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, right. I want to buy
Yep.
that, right? Because but okay. So I think when we look at companies, Dave, that are not in the tech space, and because you've got a lot of exposure to this, that I think when you and I were going back and forth prior to the show, is you've got some examples of other people getting into it. Is there you know ideas of building out software or acquiring software companies that might be worth? And how do the numbers shape? Like, how do the numbers change if someone were to go down?
Well, it's funny because we over the years we've represented what I would call a number of accidental software companies, and what I mean by that is it's either a functional type business where they have subject matter expertise, and they go, "Gee, the software for our industry is terrible. I'm just going to write my own." And
Mhm.
so they end up writing a really nice piece of software because, they're the subject matter experts. And then they try and convert their business model to, I'm now going to, instead of being a car dealer, I'm going to go out and sell car dealership software. That's a tough transition to make. They're
Mhm.
completely changing their business model. The ones that do it well oftentimes go, wow, I'm glad I'm in this business now as opposed to the original one because it's a lot more profitable.
Mhm.
So, we've seen that. In fact, we have one client right now that's in due diligence, and that's exactly what they did. They were car dealer guys, and they said, boy, our document management systems are terrible, and we don't see anything out there that we like, and the big dealer management systems don't work. Why don't we develop our own? And they found their software business to be much more profitable than the dealership business.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah, and how have you seen any? Which that makes a bunch of sense. And by the way, like just buyer beware or listener beware is going into dumping a bunch of money into coding into software is very risky,
Yeah.
right? I've been there myself, and have you seen anybody like in the main street or brick and mortar end up buying your clients in order to get into that space and to increase the value of their business or efficiencies?
That's a tough one because the sort of the multiples in the brick and mortar space are pretty well defined and not overly generous.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're talking about a software company, those multiples can get to be pretty high because of the leverage of technology and the tremendous profitability. The incremental cost for your next copy of Microsoft Office is almost zero, right? The programming has been done. Whereas if you're manufacturing a widget, the incremental cost is basically the marginal cost of labor and the marginal cost of capital and the marginal cost of resources and inputs. So it's a little bit of a different model. So we've found that sort of the traditional brick and mortar folks that may want to buy a software company, it sort of doesn't fit with their valuation models. So
Yeah.
they're not winning those deals. Let's say now they can if they decide they want to play in the multiple game where software companies are being sold, but that's a tough transition.
Well, a quick question then is, what are you actually like? What are you seeing for the valuations, and how are they getting valued for the software companies that are doing this?
Well, there are all kinds of different categories. And the high profile ones, the ones that are doing AI or gaming or mobility, those kind of are off the charts, and it's basically what the market will bear. Then you've got other models which are, what I might call legacy cash flowing software companies that are vertical industry software. Like, I do the internal accounting for architectural firms, right? So those are more humble and are closer to sort of other businesses. They're not, off the charts. They might be a 5 or 6 times EBITDA, whereas, you get some of these new rapidly growing technology companies, and it might be 8 times revenue or 10 times revenue. So
Right.
just,
It's like,
yeah, it just depends. It's very market driven.
well, and I think that's going to go into a good conversation, but I want to plant a seed for that. I want to come back to, which is someone in the main street buying a software company, because I think there's some interesting things that they can do to, if they're playing their cards right, to increase their value, and depending on what their multiple or their exit options or thoughts are. So just we'll kind of come back to that, but taking what your train of thought was further is, who did SAP buy this week? It was like, was it Qualitex or something like that? Did you see that?
I did not see that. No.
So, okay, the business, I was looking at the numbers, and honestly, Dave, I just laughed. I'm like, my gosh, it's so crazy. So this company was going to go public, and SAP swoops in. The company was doing 200 million in
Yeah.
revenue, two million in EBITDA.
Right.
So
Right.
like barely making any money, and they got 1.8 billion.
Right. Now in a Main Street bricks and mortar business, that would be 5 times EBITDA or a $10 million purchase. Yeah, I remember. I remember years ago, Ryan. I was looking at an acquisition that Johnson and Johnson made, and I remember writing in my blog. I go, I can't justify this purchase. So they bought this company that had 40 million in revenue and were barely profitable, and they paid $400 million for them. So of course I wrote before researching. So I said, I can't justify this purchase price. And then I went and researched, and I go, oh, so this company did time release medication. So they had the technology for, making drugs release over time. Well, what Johnson and Johnson figured out is they could extend the patent life of their blockbuster drugs by putting a time release component on it. It made the $400 million seem like a bargain. So that was a really interesting strategic value kind of play.
Well, in this is going to go into the conversation that we're bouncing back and forth with our notes. Is there's the EBITDA play, which and there was a very interesting customer yesterday that I was working with that is in the software space, and just kind of bear with my thought process here. Is like, as these owners, I think you kind of have to do a couple things. One is, you can always fall back on the EBITDA. If you're making a profitable business, you'll always be able to sell it and doing things certain things right on a multiple of EBITDA. But like a lot of baby boomers and a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't think about the exit. I'm not going to think about the exit. I'm like, it's just so ridiculous in my opinion, because then they're not looking at the landscape of the mergers and acquisitions and why someone would want to buy their company. So there's like this whole, like, have a foot in, like, yeah, make a profitable business, but also build something that someone's going to want to buy, and you're solving a problem, because then you can line it up with like Johnson and Johnson's customers or something like that. So I don't know, what is your thoughts on balancing the combination of EBITDA and strategic sales and building it actually to sell versus just kind of putting your head in the sand?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that go into. I have a lot of our clients come and say, hey, I want you to sell me for strategic value, and a lot of that is strategic technology, but some of it can be a business model that's superior to the norm in the business. So for example, we had one company, and they used Upwork. I don't know if you know what Upwork is. It's a freelance network. They used Upwork as their appointment bookers, and that was an incredibly successful business model for them. And that turned out to be of strategic value for the buyers of their company. a blue chip account, like for example, if you've penetrated the federal government, right, you're a vendor to the federal government, that's a very hard process. So some companies will buy somebody that's gotten their foot into that, you know, that maze and figured out how to get those clients. You know, uh, one time we said, "Gee, what's your cost of customer acquisition?" In other words, if your sales guy, if your sales guy at Quota for a year made $125,000 and sold 5 new accounts, theoretically your cost of acquisition is his annual cost divided by the number of accounts he sells. Well, if you can buy another company with installed accounts at less than that number, that could be a strategic acquisition. Uh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we were able to do, again, this is not GAAP accounting, mind you, but um, on one of them, we had a small company that had a great product. They were very comparable to, the similar product offered by the big company, but the the buyers of the small company's product go, hey, you're small, you could be gone tomorrow. I'm going to need a discount for us buying your product as compared to the big company. Well, what we did is we sold them to another big company and said, hey, by the way, look at what their income statement would look like with your pricing power. In other words, if they were owned by you, a big company, they wouldn't have to discount this anymore. On paper, we were able to double the performance of the company. Now, the buying company didn't pay us the full amount for that, but they certainly gave some strategic value there. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to gather these things that could be leveraged by the buying company, and that's how you position yourself when you're selling your company. So
And what do you think, Dave? No, I agree with a lot of what you said. But what I find is, like, think about, so these people that call you and that, like, hey, by the way, this is what I want you to do. I mean, if they would have done that 5 years in advance and then started to like engineer their way towards that, how different it could potentially be. I mean, and I think that's kind of going back to some of my question is having a balance between, okay, well, we have to make money, but then I'm also positioning this to make a huge windfall. And like, I don't know if there's, a balance that you see people doing, or you're thinking about selling it to someone, but if, worst case scenario, you're still making money, you've got a good product or a company. I don't know if you got any insights on that.
well, I think what you want to do is you want to create as much value along the way as long as you're building your business. So somebody said work as hard on yourself as you do on your business. Well, I think you need to work on sort of improving the value of your business besides just increasing sales. So for example, um, you want to build content. So if you're a plumbing company, why not create a bunch of videos or a bunch of content for people that want to go out and look at it, and they go, oh, okay, I I recognize these guys really know what they're doing and they're experts, and yeah, they showed me how to do it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go hire them to do that. To
Mhm.
establish yourself within the industry as a subject matter expert, to go to the conferences and be a speaker, to you know do the little things that give you a little a halo of value beyond just the dollars and cents of selling product.
Hmm. And I think if business owners are doing that, they're thinking about value and where they are in the marketplace instead of just collecting their 200 grand a year and just going off and just chugging along. Is like they have to kind of have a pulse on the marketplace and what's going on. And I think that'll also benefit them when they sit down with these potential buyers. And I know you and I want you to, I don't know how you worded it, but when a business owner is sitting down ready to sell their business and what these potential buyers are like, give us your little, how did you say that you through experience or bare
Oh
knuckles or
yeah, I mean, I said, if you're coming in and selling your business and you're representing yourself, and the guy sitting across the table from you has bought 36 companies, it's like they're bare knuckles brawlers, and you kind of don't stand a
yeah.
chance. The way I like to look at it is, I don't know if Ryan, you remember your coming out and getting your first apartment lease, and you get handed the document, and I'm sure you're a bright guy, and you looked at it and go, oh my God, why would anyone sign this? But guess what? They have the experience and they have the power, and so they write the document to give them every advantage. That's kind of what business buyers do. Their experience, they've been through the wars. They want to take every, eventuality, protect themselves, and quite frankly, they write terms that can be interpreted in their favor late into due diligence, and you end up taking a $200,000 haircut without even realizing it.
What are some of the things you've seen slipped into the terms and conditions? Because I think that point can't be hammered into the heads of business owners more. Like if I paid, what did I say yesterday? I was like, yeah, I'll buy your company for $200 million, but I'm going to pay you over 200 years, and this is the terms and conditions.
Right.
So what are the things that you see?
Well, the simplest one that I see in almost every letter of intent is, and you will, at closing, you will turn over to us a net working capital surplus that's consistent with industry norms. Well, that's just like, okay, you've just given me a license to steal a couple $100,000, to be off the market in due diligence for 90 days and then have their big five accounting firm come back to you and go, oh, by the way, you need to turn over $600,000 of net working capital. Well, where'd you get that number? Well, that's what our experts told us. So you have two choices. You can either cave in or you blow up the deal. And both of those are expensive. So one of the things you do is you want to define what the net working capital is. So, current assets minus current liabilities, and it will be 200,000. And so you tell them how you're going to measure it, and you tell them what the level will be. It's all a negotiation. We get other ones where they have an earnout, and the earnout is what I would call an all or nothing. So they go, okay, it's $5 million cash at close, and then here's an earnout over 4 years, and you have to grow your revenue by 15%. And if you don't grow your revenue by 15%, you don't get any of the earnout. I go, no, you don't do that. You do a percentage of revenue. You put it to a formula. Another one that happens is they do multiple targets in order to earn your earnout. So you have to hit this revenue and this profitability. No, that doesn't work either. Because guess what? You've got somebody else that's driving the car. They have the keys. What if your corporate overhead allocation is $1 million a year? All of a sudden, all of your profits have gone away. You didn't control that, and you don't make your earnout. So there are all kinds of things that but what I would say is an intelligently worded earnout. Your buyer is going to want you to make that.
Yeah, right.
Because that means you're doing really well.
I was just saying, I just laugh because that's called bare knuckle brawling right there, right? Where it's like you just don't know what happened until after the fact, and you're just going, what in the hell did I just do? And the deal momentum ends up forcing people into making really terrible decisions, or forced to, even though they didn't want to. But this an earnout gone well is I got a buddy, he just closed on this deal. And he got all this. I don't think I've ever seen a sweetheart deal like this. And hopefully he'll be on the show at some point. But 2.5 times future revenue.
Wow,
is what he got. I know.
Wow.
And then if he acquires companies, he gets 1 times or something. So literally, the company was just like, go for it, dude. Go sell stuff.
Right.
But he had gotten all this other money up front, and so there was a bunch of other things, but. Yeah, so the earnouts aren't all bad if you negotiate them the way you want to.
Yes.
So what can the business owner do, and what have you seen people do that have very successful terms like that when they're sitting down with sophisticated buyers like this? Because you can't just go in blind.
Well, let me give you my 30-second negotiation class.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to my wife the other day, and she says, "Oh, our son, he got an offer on the house. He was selling his house, and she said, and they asked for a $10,000 concession, and they asked for this to be fixed, this to be fixed, this to be fixed, and this to be fixed. And he said no on all of them, and they took the deal. And man, my chest was puffed out. I'm going, man, that's my boy. He can really negotiate. And then she says, yes, but he had 4 other offers. So there's my 30-second negotiating class. If you have other offers, you are a much better negotiator. So, for example, we had this company that was well in demand from the buying community, and we provided, we had like 8 bidders down at the end. We provided counter proposals, and the counter proposals were pretty rich. In other words, they offered $8 million, and we came back and said it's $11.5 million. So the guy's going, $11.5 million. I said, well, I'm either a hell of a poker player or we got a lot of competition out there. And that's the key is the problem with being a business owner and processing your own sale is, I'll use another term, as a bare knuckles brawler. I say, well, if you're doing that and you're going against a private equity group that has bought 200 companies over their lifetime, it's like facing Nolan Ryan with a wiffle ball bat. You're probably not going to do very well. So the other thing with owner selling it himself is that's a full-time job, and he already has a full-time job. And because of that, he's going to process his offers serially. In other words, he's going to do one at a time, and he'll follow that one through. And then if that doesn't work out, he'll then start processing another one, and he'll follow that one through. But you have no competition and no way to sort of leverage the buyer. I mean, when was the last time you walked into a car dealership and you look at the sticker price, you grab the salesman and go, okay, write it up. That just doesn't happen, right?
Right. You pull up Google and you show them 17 other cars that look exactly the same. To do this.
Right. Now that's way easier for a car than a business, because businesses are so unique. Cars and houses are pretty easy to value, right? Here's a number of bedrooms. Here's the neighborhood. Here's the school district. Here's the age of the roof, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all pretty standard, and you get pretty close. But as you said with your deal where they got 2 times future revenue, wow, where'd they come up with that one?
Yeah. Well, I think, but and I agree with you that the businesses are, and I think that's what you and I and a lot of people in this industry are trying to do, is trying to make it fairly consistent. And you and I were both talking about John Warlow and the Value Builder system, and there's certain things that are coming out there these days and say, like, no matter what business or what industry, you have to do these things to have repeatable cash flow. And so I'm curious, in like these people that you're getting 8 times, 8 different people, what is the competition of? What are all these people drooling over for these businesses?
Well, as we talked about a great deal here, the first primary thing that they liked is, this last one, almost 100% of their revenue was contractually recurring, right? They have them they have the corporate credit card every month. It just gets automatically charged. And that's, a very consistent business. The other thing that we saw was the ability to take a company that's in one vertical and move them to multiple verticals. That's really key. Is you get a small company and they have limited capital. You ran a family business. You pretty much stick to your knitting unless you get a capital infusion. But you get bought by a big company, and let's say you're doing document management for car dealers. Well, you bring in a private equity group that's got all this capital and all these connections, and they go, yeah, we want to do it for car dealerships, but then we want to expand to home health care, and then we want to expand to medical claims processing, and then and so you take a business that goes to one vertical, and then you add additional verticals. Another thing they can do is expand geography. So if you're in the New York City area, why wouldn't that business model work in Chicago, Washington, D.C., Cleveland, Ohio, etc.? So if you've got a strong business model that can be duplicated and all you need is additional capital and resources, those are, again, strategic value can be, you got a really cool technology, But strategic value can be, hey, I've got a business process that's awesome. I've got a sales process that's awesome, right? I've had companies
Mhm.
buy smaller companies because they go, wow, you run your sales force so much more efficiently than I do mine. The value in your company to me is you've got a better sales process. I'm going to
Right.
implement your sales process on my big sales force, improve the performance of that. And I've just paid for your entire company just with the improvement of my performance of my sales force.
And I think you hit on a bunch of really good points, David. And a couple things is that one is this is why business owners need to think about where they have value all the time, and then how it relates to the market and where they're going. Because otherwise, like if that person knocked on the door, and that person knows why they're buying them, but this person has no idea why they're going to be purchased, and they get this random number. They don't know that they could have potentially got three times more for their business because they didn't do enough due diligence, understanding why that person's actually even interested. And I see that all the time where it's like, oh, and then they're like, holy crap, I guess I could have, it wouldn't have been a multiple EBITDA or whatever if I would have just been paying attention. But, also it is, Dave, going back to when I was saying earlier on, when you're talking about the strategic verticals or expanding or whatever, is like, if you think about maybe like a, mainstream business that doesn't have reoccurring revenue or a software or whatever. I mean, I think that there's a huge argument that if someone is willing to pay the value and sees it and potentially is driving towards an exit or growth, depending on where they're coming from, is if they have a big customer base or different industries or different verticals, if they bought a software company, they could immediately deploy that to their customer base as well and cross pollinate. And then the whole machine, instead of getting a 3 or 4 times X, I mean, they can get a significant value if they're looking at doing all that and landing it on a private equity or something like that. So I do think that there's a way that, because otherwise they'd have to build it themselves, which is just a big pain in the butt.
Right. Well, a lot of people might not think a restaurant would be a subscription model. Okay, so there's a restaurant that was started in the Chicago area, and we love it because it's a restaurant that has a wine club, right? And so you
Nice.
you sign up for 2 or 3 bottles a month, and then of course you probably go there to pick up your bottles, and then they have wine tastings where you go there, and then they serve dinner, and you can have your wine that you bought at retail served to you at dinner. So instead of paying, $65 for a nice bottle of wine at dinner, you're paying $22. Plus you've got the wine
Hmm.
club membership. I mean, I thought it was a brilliant business model, and they've been able to expand to, 8 or 9 other cities. So, you know, again, they didn't have brilliant technology. They just had a great business model idea.
Well, isn't it's so no, that is awesome. I'd sign me up. Um, is I think if someone has customers that are paying them for something, there's a way for them if they just think differently. And it's definitely cognitive work and or potentially other strenuous work to build it all up. But like it's so worth it because you have people paying you money. Just think about how to deliver different things differently, and like the return on your thoughts could be huge.
I completely agree. I mean, there's brilliance in business models. So, you think back to the Golden Arches, right? McDonald's. Well, they figured out how
Yeah.
to do hamburgers quickly and cheaply and quality control, and that turned out to be a dominant franchise for our lifetime. If you've
Mhm.
got a Main Street business and you have excellence written all over it by your systems, your business model, your approach, your procurement process, whatever it is that somebody could with more capital could leverage. Those are elements for getting strategic value for your company. And you actually, Ryan, earlier you mentioned is guys try and figure out a way to articulate what that, research who the buyer is and articulate what the fit of your company is to that buyer and how they could leverage your assets. Your
Mhm.
business sale is the most important sale you'll make. If you're a good salesman, sell your company that way.
Right. And pay attention to it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So, you wrote a book recently, and what's give us a little bit of the overview of the book and where the listeners can find it.
Well, I'd like to share. This is kind of, I'm kind of an old dog in learning new tricks, but over the years, I've written about 100 articles, and they're really taken right from deals, right? Here's what happened
Hmm.
on this deal. Here was a letter of intent that we got that had all these hidden things. Here was an earnout. All of these were elements of our business, and we would put them in the blog. And at a certain point, I go, wow, I've got a lot of content here. I think I'm going to write a book. So I used a editor and illustrator. I went to Upwork and hired a guy to edit it and do the graphics, and then put it on Amazon Kindle. And then one of my guys in the industry, an M&A guy, calls me up. He says, "Hey, I see you've got a book on Kindle. Get a paperback." And I said, "Why would I do that?" He says, "It's the best thing I ever did for my business." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I go give talks at these industry events and I hand out my book. And when they're going to sell their company, guess who they come to?" Well,
Hmm.
in the old days, you publish a book, you have to go find a publisher, and then they have a minimum run, so you're looking at 10 or 20,000 bucks. Well, Amazon bought this company that's publish on demand. So in other words, every time somebody orders a paperback, they actually print it out and send it. Now they take the lion's share of the fee, but my objective with the book is to help business owners, and secondly is if they want to hire somebody, they're going to hire the guy that wrote the book on it. So the book is called "Selling Your Software Company: An Insider's Guide to Achieving Strategic Value." And that's quite a mouthful, but it really applies to any company. I just happen to have, I specialize in software and IT, but it's about positioning your company for strategic value. Find those nuggets that will appeal to a larger company with a bigger capital structure and more resources. The other part, probably a third of the book, is how to defend your value when you're going through due diligence.
Hmm.
There's on my soapbox a little bit here, but there's sort of a perverse view out there in the private equity group that says anything we can do to win, that's fair. And so the modus operandi is they come in with a high bid, a letter of intent, and the letters of intent are qualified, meaning they're non-binding. They're just a statement of, if we're going to commit resources to doing due diligence, here's what we're going to pay for your company. And then they spend the next 3 months hacking away at that value. They hire the accounting firms and they do what they call a quality of earnings report. Well, my view on a quality of earnings report is, how can we attack the value of your company and bring in our experts to justify it? And so you went through that, I'm pretty sure, in your business sale.
Yeah, and that's why I've a little note too. That's why I've told our listeners and owners that they do that stuff ahead of time. So it's essentially everything that you can do to pretty much switch the power dynamics, and you should be telling the PE firms what to do. Is my opinion.
Well, what you do is during the process, before you sign a letter of intent or dual sign a letter of intent, that's where you do your negotiations. You do your heavy negotiating
Hmm.
before you take yourself off the market. You want them to
Right.
define what the net working capital is. You want them to define exactly how the earnout is calculated. You want them to define this and that and this. And so if you do a very tight letter of intent with and it's really important to communicate just how much in demand you are, meaning, hey, there are other buyers out here, and if you misbehave, we're pulling it off the market and taking it to them. That's really your
Yep.
only leverage. And
Hmm.
so the key is, one is getting that value sort of at the beginning of the letter of intent process, but really a lot of the hard work is during that 3 months of your value being under attack. How do you maintain and translate what you got in the letter of intent and have that actually translated with the same terms and conditions in the purchase agreement? I think that's
Yeah.
the biggest surprise that business owners find out.
Well, and what's interesting, Dave, is like I think if you take everything that you just said, and you actually mentioned something in the emails going back and forth before we got on the show is if an owner is thinking and the listener says, okay, I'm going to be doing this over the next few years, like if I learn this stuff, I kind of like level up my game and I understand what the process is going to look like there are 6,000 private equity firms in the US right now. And there's so many people that want to buy businesses that if they've even done half of a decent job building a decent business, you should be able to dictate the terms and conditions and have a bunch of buyers. And what did you like? I'll give it to you because I think I know it was, but I get the same thing where I have private equity firms and buyers call me all the time. Like, do you have any customers for
Yeah.
sale? And I'm like, give the analogy that you gave in the notes.
Well,
It was with
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
college.
Yeah, I get contacted all the time by private equity groups, and they go, "Okay, I want, you know, a fragmented business. I want a cash flow positive. I want an EBITDA at least 2 million. I want it to be defensible. I want it, like a Warren Buffett description." And I go, "Yeah, you and 5,000 other PE groups." I said, "That's like going to draft a quarterback." And I say, "Well, I want somebody who looks like Peyton Manning." Well, even if I ran that football team, it'd be pretty hard for me to screw that up if Peyton Manning was my quarterback. So
I know it's like, and I get it all the time. So I think there's a couple takeaways there, though. Don't you think, Dave? Where it's like one is that if a listener like do these things because you will literally be the Peyton Mannings because no one else is doing the hard work, and there's that many people out there that want these kind of
right.
companies.
Yeah, I mean, buyers don't want commodity type businesses. They don't want to have to grind in the dirt to capture business by taking another penny off the price of their product. I mean, they want something. There was a book written. I thought it was very cool. It's called The Blue Ocean Strategy, and they
Mm-hmm.
talked about don't fight in that, don't scrub around in the dirt for those nickels, reinvent the business model. And one of the ones that I remember they used as an example was Cirque du Soleil. And the circus was dying, and it was had all these negative things where the animal activists didn't like the way they were treating the elephants or the lions, and you had all the stars that you were trying to. And Cirque du Soleil just completely rewrote the book, and they had no competition, and the pricing was off the charts. So what's attractive to buyers is things that have moats around them, things that are difficult for somebody else to duplicate. And again, you need to find those things out about your business that you do. And if for example, getting blue chip accounts, it's growing up in the Chicago area and selling, it's not easy to penetrate a Caterpillar tractor or a John Deere, right? Every vendor in the world is after them. Well, if you've got a foothold in those accounts, you're going to be valuable to a large company buyer because it's way easier to sell additional product into an existing account than it is to open a new account. So those blue chip accounts, if that's your strength, that's what you ought to be selling to the buyers of your business.
And make them sign contracts. Like and so go get those and then do the hard work to get
Right.
to get the contracts. I had this gal that was on she was on my podcast, Vicky Report, and she spent 2 years because they had a bunch of big blue chip accounts and there was a lot of just kind of time and material projects, and they went and they got like 3-year contracts signed, and she just crushed the value of the company. So she spent a couple of years doing really hard negotiating with these people, but then it was just amazing what she ended up doing with the business. So, Dave, as we're kind of wrapping up, what are, is there something, we talked about a lot of different things, something that you want to highlight, or if there's, maybe something that we didn't touch on that you want to leave with the listeners?
It's very interesting, since we published our book, and by the way, that strategy worked. So any business owner out there, if you have the content and want to publish a book, the barriers to being a published author have been completely democratized. I mean, it is so easy. I was blown away. So if you have content and you like to write, that certainly is a good strategy. But one of the things that has happened is our inbound traffic because of that book has gone up, threefold or fourfold. the most amazing thing that I found was we would get calls from these guys and they go, "Hey, I got a letter of intent from a buyer. I need your help." And for my first 14 years in business, I'd go, "Yeah, well, the best way I can help you is we'll do a full M&A engagement. I'll throw them into the mix. We'll leverage them against people. We'll do a soft auction and we'll sell your company for a ton of money." And they'd go, "Nope, I just want to see how this one plays out." And it was tremendously frustrating to me because in my mind, I knew they were going against this gauntlet, because the bid is going to be a low ball. The bid is going to have all the contract, like your apartment lease, in favor of the buyer. They're going to attack your value during due diligence, and you're either going to blow up the deal or take a big haircut. So that was my sort of view of, and so I said, "Well, I can't."
I see all that all the
Yeah,
time, Dave.
I can't help you then. So then what I would do is say, "Okay, I'll give you a carve out." So if the unsolicited buyer is the one that buys you after we throw them into a regular M&A deal, we'll give you a huge discount on our success fees. And that met with a little bit of success, but not really. So what I did recently is I said, "Okay, you can hire us on an hourly basis to do letter of intent consulting." And that is exactly what they wanted. We launched the service while I was on vacation, actually, in March of this year. We've got 7 new engagements of guys that had letter of intent, and they wanted help processing that one letter of intent. And remember, I talked about the importance of competition. Well, what we do is we sell companies. So the buyer, when we get involved, they don't know if we've got other buyers. We're trying to provide that backstop. And so a lot of times these are just lowball offers, and they hire us for 4 or 5 hours and the guy goes away when he finds out it's going to be competitive. Sometimes the deals go through and we help them save money on, net working capital adjustments or earnouts or whatever. But at least we're providing a service that the market wants. So that's been a big learning over the last couple of years for us, and a very positive one.
That's fantastic. So if the listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Well, our website is www.midmarkcap.com, midmarkcap.com. My email address is davekauppi@midmarkcap.com, or they can pick up the phone and occasionally I answer 269-231-5772.
Dave, I absolutely had a blast. Oh, go ahead.
And the book on Amazon called Selling Your Software Company,
Yep.
An Insider's Guide to Achieving Strategic Value. And again, it's for software companies because that's our main focus. But, 80% of the lessons in there apply to anyone selling their business.
Well, and again, like we were talking about, even mainstream businesses can learn a lot from that or potentially acquire them. So I think it's definitely worth the read. And we'll have all these links in the show notes. And it was an absolute blast having you on the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.